Okay, hello everyone. I'm guessing I'm live. This is my first time to use Google Hangouts, but I'm excited by the fact that it creates a YouTube video, which should make this real easy for all of us. So just to give you a little bit of my background, because it actually relates to some of the information I'm going to provide to you, I've been working as a registered dietitian in clinical settings, hospitals, WIC, women, infant, children programs, done a little bit of work with the school system for 30 years now. So a lot of the suggestions that I'm going to share with you are suggestions that came from my clients, what I've seen work successfully, and also using that same information to answer your questions. So I asked you last week to post some questions related to the first week's module and got some great questions. I also got some questions that actually relate better to what we're going over this week. There were a couple of that fit next week's lesson on physical activity. So those questions I'm going to wait and address next week and the week after. We're going to fit them in. But there is another message board thread that I've started this week so that you can continue to post additional questions. So I pulled out the questions that were asked the most in some form or another, different modifications, and that related the best to what we talked about in week 1. And it really is dealing with managing your weight, the importance of tracking your food, and getting started on exercise. So I will just start down the list that I've put together. Now, if something that I say today generates more questions, post it on this week's message board, and I can expand on it further next week or maybe offer some more clarifications or even other examples. So one that was actually asked a few times said, how do I determine how many calories to eat in order to either lose weight or maintain weight? And it's all a guesstimate. We have formulas that we work with, but it's not always real precise, but it's a starting point on the two methods that I'm going to tell you about in order to determine how much you should eat and then how to create the calorie deficit. So one of the easiest ways is using the tool that we gave you in week 1, which was the calculator.net. When you go in there and you estimate your energy, you're going to be putting in your age, your gender, your height, your weight. You're going to plug in how active you currently are. And it uses that information to tell you this is how many calories it would take for you to maintain your current weight. And again, just a guesstimate, but it's a good starting point. That's called your TEE, your total energy expenditure. Now, the general rule is for every 500 calories deficit, 500 calories less each day that you eat, you should be able to lose about 1 pound per week, because they estimated that 1 pound is the equivalent of 3,500 calories. So 500 calories deficit times 7 days is 3,500. Keep in mind that in reality, you wouldn't lose probably 1 pound a week unless maybe you were male. Females tend to only lose a ½ pound to 3/4 pound a week based on that, but any loss is good loss, so that's still okay. When they did these studies and came up with the formulas, they primarily used young adult males that were in college. So that's why the 500 calorie deficit works so well, and they didn't really extrapolate it that well for females. So 500 calories less per day. So if you plugged in the formula and you found out that it takes 2,500 calories to maintain your current weight, if you reduced it to 2,000 calories a day, hypothetically, you will lose weight. If you reduced it to 1,500 calories per day, hypothetically, you could lose 2 pounds per week. Probably would only be 1 pound per week if you're female. So that's the formula behind it. Basically, you have to expend more calories than you're taking in. So you have to create a calorie deficit. And you can do that with calorie restriction, but you want to add in exercise, which we're going to talk about also. I do want to mention we recommend you do not go below 1,200 calories when you're following a diet unless you're working with a health professional. We know that diets under 1,200 calories are more likely to be nutrient deficient, and you could impact your metabolism. If your body thinks it's being starved, being deprived, it actually slows down the metabolism, the rate at which it burns energy in order to protect itself. So I ask my clients to not go below 1,200 calories unless we have some reason to justify it. Now, I want to tell you about a second method you can use to estimate your calories that wasn't in your lesson. This is where you estimate that it takes 25 calories per kilogram of body weight. And this is based on somebody who is not active. So an example might be that someone that gets up in the morning, gets dressed, eats breakfast, feeds the pets, gets in the car, drives to work, sits behind the desk job most of the day, gets up, goes home. So somebody that's very low activity level, this can be fairly predictive. So I'm using an example that someone that weighs 180 pounds, to get their kilograms, I divide by 2.2. And that tells me the person is 82 kilograms. So then I take 82 kilograms times 25 calories, and this person would need approximately 2,000 calories a day to maintain their weight because they're low activity. So this formula doesn't work if you're have a higher activity level. But if you're sedentary, which is a lot of our population, then this is a fairly good approximation. So you could also use that as a starting point. Or you could even compare it to calculator.net and see how the two come out. Now, because we're talking about reducing your calories, we emphasized in lesson 1 that you really need to know how much you're eating. And you need to be accurate in tracking your calories, because it doesn't do any good to just eyeball and estimate your calories. You're rarely ever going to get it right. So, some tips on recording your calories so that you can determine what you're currently eating and then how much you might want to reduce it by if your goal is to lose weight. Well, and even just recording if you want to maintain your weight, if you want to make sure you don't gain in the future, this is good to do. So a few tips that I wrote down. Record as soon as you can so you don't have to rely on memory, because you may forget about the 10 M&Ms or the handful of peanuts because they weren't really a meal or even a snack. You just grabbed them. So it's better to write things down, record them on your computer, take pictures of them with your iPhone, scan the labels. Do it as much as you can as you go along. When you are at home in particular, pull out the measuring cups and use the scale, because again, you'll underestimate how much you're eating. There was a question, I don't remember if it actually popped up on this week or just one of the other discussions. It said, which is more accurate, using the scale or using the measuring cups? And using the scale is the most accurate. You can get scales for $4 up to $50, depending on how fancy you want to go. I have one that I think I paid $20 for because I liked the way it looked. It was kind of a cool looking scale. But it can convert from pounds to grams to ounces. And so I like that I have that flexibility when I'm checking my portions. And then when I'm looking at food databases to find my calories, it's easier to convert. So measuring cups, food scales are very important, and record everything no matter how small. I very frequently eat 5 M&Ms. And that's it, just 5 M&Ms. And it seems like nothing, but if I do that 5 times a day, that adds up. A lot of times I'll grab free mints from a restaurant, and then I have a 45-minute drive home. I could eat, 8 of those just on my drive home without even thinking about it. So you need to keep track of every little thing. One of the questions that came up from a couple of people, what if I don't like counting calories? And that's a common comment. It's going to be difficult to manage your weight if you don't count calories. Now, some people are naturally lucky in their metabolism and they don't have to worry about their weight either. But if you don't periodically double check yourself on calories, again, you're going to underestimate. It takes more time when you first get started, because you're having to look for the resources, you're having to make decisions like if you're using MyFitnessPal, which lasagna do you want to go with, because there's probably 300 lasagna choices on there. But the more you do it, the easier it gets, especially if you tend to eat the same foods on a regular basis. Then you've created your own database as you go along. It makes it easier. I want to mention to you, because I'm going to refer to this throughout, in the United States, we have the Weight Control Registry. And the Weight Control Registry has over 10,000 people in it. These are people that have lost at least 30 pounds and have kept it off for 1 year or more. And what they have done is they've tracked the habits of these individuals to see what are they doing that helped them lose weight and what are they doing that helps them keep the weight off. Now, granted, those of you that are researchers would probably say, well, they were the type of person that are just disciplined to begin with, and so it might be easier for them to keep the weight off. And that's true. We recognize that could be a possibility, but I think it's still good to talk about the habits, what they did to lose weight and what they're doing to maintain the weight. And that relates to the counting the calories. The persons in the weight control registry counted their calories while they were losing weight. They continue to count their calories daily because it is a constant reminder and a constant way to keep yourself accountable to how you're eating. So I'll refer to the weight control registry participants a few times because I think we need to consider the habits that they have going that are helping them. One of the questions was, can you just diet alone or can you just in order to lose weight? You can, but you're probably not going to be real successful. Of the weight control registries, 90% of them use diet and exercise. 9% were successful with dieting alone, and only 1% were successful with exercise alone. We have a lot of research that supports the best way to lose weight and maintain your loss is diet, exercise, and behavior modification. An example of behavior modification, when I drive home, if I go to the grocery store first, I used to put the groceries in the seat next to me. I kind of get bored on the way home and I might open up a package of pretzels and just start eating on the way home. So an example of behavior modification, I had to put my groceries in the trunk because I did do that a couple of times, started eating. So by putting them in the trunk, if I really want to eat on the way home, I'd have to pull off the side of the road, get out, get my groceries out, and I don't want to mess with that. So that's an example of behavior modification. Learning to change your environment and make some decisions based on that. So we do want to do a combination of diet and exercise, and how the exercise can actually help with your food control. When you exercise, you release endorphins. The endorphins give you a greater sense of confidence. They make you feel in control, and when you feel in control, it's easier to be disciplined in your food choices. And those, when you look at the research studies, those that only used one method, they think it was because that the diet had more of an impact because those who exercised felt hungrier and were eating more without realizing it because they weren't tracking their intake. And also, if you exercise, you don't have to be as restrictive with your calorie intake. As an example, I went through a period I really had to focus on my weight. Car accident, I had gained a lot of weight. When I finally committed to making changes and losing weight, I gave myself a range of 12 to 1,500 calories a day. I didn't want to lock into one specific calorie level because if I didn't achieve that, I didn't want to feel like a failure because we tend to punish ourselves sometimes, and we can punish ourselves by just eating more, saying, I've blown it anyway. So why worry about it now? So I gave myself a range of 12 to 1,500 calories. And if it was a day that I was sticking with around calories, I didn't have to exercise quite as much. But if it was a day that I was hitting the 1,500, maybe even 1,600, then I would throw in extra exercise sessions to kind of make up for the fact that I ate more. So exercising gives you a little more flexibility and may let you eat a little bit more. So in terms of what calorie level is best, you have to decide what you can live with. This needs to be something you can sustain for an extended period of time to get results. Most of my female clients choose anywhere between 1,200 and 1,500 calories. My male clients tend to go with anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000. And a lot of time, it depends on their starting weight. If I have a gentleman that's 450 pounds, eating 4,000 calories a day, then 2,000 is a 50% reduction. So even though for some of us 2,000 sounds like a lot, in some cases it's a pretty big adjustment. Another question, what is the best diet? Low carb, low fat? There is no one best diet. Even though the companies that are out there would like you to think that they have the best program, a research study came out this last year that says the best diet is whatever you like and you will sustain. Because these changes are not just temporary. You're learning to change the way you eat for the rest of your life in terms of portion sizes. The Atkins diet has been very popular, and people lose quickly on the high-fat, high-protein, low-carb diet, different forms of it. But at the 2-year mark, they had lost no more weight than somebody who followed the high-carb diet. And that's because a lot of them just could not sustain changes and resume some of their old eating habits. So you have to decide what appeals to you, what you think you can be disciplined about and stick with. I know that right now the low-carb diets are very popular. I lost 70 pounds and I did it by eating high carb. I ate 50 to 60% of my carbs every day in low fat because I love my carbs. And so that's what kept me satisfied. Let me eat M&Ms too, which is another thing that I love. The participants in the weight control registry followed a lower calorie diet. They had 1,400 calories a day, and they were a lower fat. It wasn't considered real low fat, but it was a 27% fat diet, just to give you an idea. So that's what you have to decide. No best diet. What is it that you think you can sustain for an extended period of time? I'm used to being in classes where I would say, and now, are there any questions? But I am going to play around with the Google Hangouts on air and see if we can't set it up so that you get a chance to ask questions. The next question was, how do I get past a plateau? Okay, so there are some things you need to look at. How much are you exercising at this point? If you started out doing 150 minutes a week and hadn't been exercising at all, and you that's great, but maybe you need to up it. The Sports Medicine Academy or Society of Sports Medicine has put out some research materials, and they show that people at 150 minutes maintaining their weight, individuals who hit 250 minutes per week of exercise started losing on a fairly consistent basis. It was the individuals who were exercising 350 minutes a week that lost significant amount of weight on a regular basis. So with my clients, if they're not exercising at all, we get them going on the 150. When they're no longer losing weight through diet and exercise at 150, I have them go to 250. A lot of them can stay there a long time. Personally, I stayed at 250 minutes a week for 1.5 years and kept losing weight. You may get to the point, though, that you have to hit the 350 minutes a week, which is basically 1 hour, 6 days a week. Doesn't have to be continuous hour. You can break it up into whatever segments you want. But I will tell you, over my 30 years, that whenever I get an individual hitting 350 minutes of exercise a week, they all lose weight at some point. It's a hard level to commit to, but sometimes that's what it takes. You have to challenge your body a little bit more, push it a little bit harder. If you hit a plateau, you may need to change up your exercise. Your body can get very conditioned for whatever you're doing. You may need to throw in some strength training if you've not been doing that. If you've been walking, jogging, maybe you need to find some aerobics class, maybe do a spin cycle, throw in some jump rope. So challenge your body in a different way, and that can get you over a plateau. There's also what's called high intensive training. HIIT is the acronym for it. And this is doing progressive resistance exercise at a very high level effort, basically going as hard as you can for a brief time frame. And it's basically working harder for a shorter period of time. If you Google high intensity training, you'll find a lot of information. A lot of times it involves working with weights. And if you have never worked with weights before or have not received instruction in it, I really recommend you see a certified fitness trainer before you start your high intensity training, because there is risk for injury if you don't know what you're doing with that. But that's a way to get past a plateau. Now, there's also called interval training, and I started doing this summer. And this is where you alternate the activity. For example, you might walk 2 minutes and then jog 1 minute, or you could flip it. You could jog 2 minutes and then walk 1 minute. And you determine the routine yourself. There's a variety out there. You'll see some examples on the internet. And I bought an interval timer and I set it to beep. Because of my injury to my knees, I can't go really fast for very long. So I set it that I would walk 3 minutes and then it beeped, and then I would try to jog for 1 minute. And that got my heart rate up a little bit more, helped me burn fat stores a little bit better. I mentioned strength training to get past the plateau. And then it's not just exercise to get you past a plateau. Have you quit measuring your foods? Have you quit checking your portion sizes? Did you quit tracking your foods? You may have think you developed such good habits you don't need to do that anymore. You will gradually increase your portion sizes or even the frequency of your foods without even realizing it. Okay, so another question was, how do I get motivated to exercise? Next week's lesson is all about exercise, and Diana's put together some great suggestions on getting started, and also reasons why you'll hopefully be motivated. But I put together a little list, again, based on my client experience. Remind yourself why it's important to exercise. Create a list. Some of the things that you might put on your list. I want to keep up with my kids. I want to keep up with my grandkids. I want to lower my risk for chronic diseases, particularly cancers, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure. I want to sleep better. I want to be able to handle stress. Some of you, if you're feeling tired a lot of people don't know that exercise increases the red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen. So if you say, I'm too tired to exercise, you'll probably find that when you start to exercise, you have more energy. And then one that's been very important to my clients, this has been a big motivator. For every 1 pound that you lose, you have 4 pounds less impact on your joints. So think of that downward motion every time your foot hits. That's 4 pounds of the weight that's on your knees, your ankles, your feet, your hips, your back. That was a motivator for me because of my car accident. I used to do some running and I couldn't do that. I couldn't even jog anymore because of damage. And I gained a lot of weight as a result. When they told me that I was probably going to need knee replacement surgery in one knee and maybe both, that's when I got motivated to lose the weight. And I ended up losing 70 pounds over about a 3-year period. So you take that 70 times 4, I took 280 pounds of force off my knees every time I take a step. They're now telling me I may never need knee replacement surgery. So that was my motivator. Find out, make your list, think about what it could mean in order to get motivated. Some things you can do, put it on your calendars. Somebody posted on one of the message boards, I think it was yesterday, that when she gets home now, she immediately changes into her exercise clothes and goes for a walk before she does anything else. That's great. Decide when you're going to do it. Make it part of your routine. Set an alarm to remind you. There was a few months period that I couldn't exercise until about 8 in the evening. And so I used to set an alarm so that I couldn't use the excuse of laundry or dishes or anything like that. When the alarm went off, I told myself I have to exercise 30 minutes. If after 30 minutes I want to quit, I had permission. That was okay. Most of the time, after 30 minutes, I thought, I feel good. I can keep going. But I set an alarm. Ask someone to be an accountability partner, to either exercise with them or to report into. Tell them that you want to 3 times a week report in with your exercise, and then you feel a little obligation. Make sure you get a good pair of shoes, I want to mention. If you're not exercising in good shoes, you could create pain and joint problems. Other ways to get motivated, you can watch TV. When it's dark outside and the weather's bad, I put down a yoga mat in the living room. I find one of my favorite TV shows and I walk in place. A lot of my clients have stability problems, and so they're not safe to walk outdoors. And so I have them do the same thing, but they put a chair in front of them and they hold on to the back of the chair as they walk in place. For approximately every 20 minutes you walk in place, you burn about 100 calories. So if you could walk in place for 45 minutes to an hour, we're talking to 200 to 300 calories burned, and that's significant. Somebody said, you know, what's the importance of cardio versus strength? It's really good to have both. You'll burn more calories at the time doing cardio, but the strength training exercises give you an afterburn because you're increasing muscle mass, and muscle mass is more metabolically active. Somebody else asked, is there one particular time of day that you'll be more successful at weight loss in terms of when you exercise? Studies have found the earlier in the day you exercise, the better your chances at losing weight. Partly because at the end of the day you're tired. It's easy to talk yourself out of it. You can say, well, I need sleep more than anything. If you do it earlier in the day, there are less excuses. It also gives you more confidence. People tend to make better food choices when they exercised earlier in the days. Keep inspirational messages on hand where you can send them. The one that I sent you last week, I have on my desk at the hospital where I work. Use social sites. Some people have already mentioned on the message boards they're using Photocracy. I'm not familiar with that one, but it was mentioned by a couple. MyFitnessPal, Spark People, we gave you some others. You can get support from individuals through those sites because they're usually there for the same reason that you are. Okay, we're almost out of time here, so a couple of other questions. What can you do when the weather's bad for exercise? Bike, ellipticals, treadmill. My favorite is to walk in place indoors because the only thing it cost me was a $10 yoga mat. That was because my husband said I was going to wear out the carpet. Honestly, my carpet's so old I wasn't concerned about it, but he didn't want me making it worse. There are exercise videos you can check out from your library. You can do strength training on your own. Cheap materials. You can do hand weights, resistance bands. There are exercise shows on TV that you could tape. There was a question about, can I have a cheat day? You could have a cheat day where you really don't have to worry about what you eat, but you should probably still set limits. Sundays are my day. I don't stick with a certain amount of calories, but I still never go more than 400 calories over my upper limit. So I allow myself a little bit more flexibility. And I will tell you, the participants in the weight control registry ate the same way on weekends as they did during the day. They ate the same way on holidays as they did during the regular days. So basically it was saying they didn't have cheat days on a regular basis. The other thing that they didn't do, they didn't keep a lot of variety in the house. The fewer choices they kept in the house, the less likely they felt compelled to eat outside the guidelines. So the last thing that I'm going to mention, how do I maintain my weight loss or not gain additional weight? We know people can lose weight. That's why we have so much yo-yo dieting, lose, gain, lose, gain. So we know people can lose weight. What we're not very good at is keeping the weight off once we've lost it. So I'm going to tell you some tips from the National Weight Control Registry. They are still exercising an average of 1 hour per day to maintain the weight loss. 90% of them are exercising 1 hour per day. I already mentioned they eat the same no matter what the day of the week it is or whether it's a holiday. They're not eating fast food more than once per week. I mentioned they limit the variety of the foods and that they're recording their food intake. 44% of them weigh themselves every day. Now, we recognize your weight can change for fluid shifts and things, and you have to acknowledge that and not get bummed out if it changes. But they are weighing themselves daily. It's an accountability factor. And the rest of them, the other half, were weighing at least once per week. And you try to weigh at the same time each day using the same scale. They are also eating breakfast on a regular basis because it keeps them overeating later in the day. And they were actually eating 4 to 5 times a day. So they were eating 3 meals plus 1 to 2 snacks. And they said that it was more satisfying and they were less likely to overeat. And they're also watching fewer than 10 hours of TV a week, which means they're not in the couch, sitting in their chair or sitting on the couch or laying on the couch. They're up and moving around. But a lot of my clients don't realize that once they lose the weight, they still have to keep moving. Every year that you get older, you're losing muscle mass. After the age of 30, you lose muscle mass every decade. That slows down your metabolism. And instead of being more active as we age, to counteract that, we get less active. And that's one of the reasons we tend to gain weight with each decade. So I would say the biggest take-home message in terms of maintaining weight loss is to stay active, because you're going to feel good, you're going to feel in control, and that's going to help you with your decision-making, with your food choices, and a lot of other things. So I hope this gave you some ideas of how you can get started to some changes. And again, doesn't have to be drastic changes. We're talking about little changes that you can build on, develop some confidence, develop a routine and some discipline. So if this generated any additional questions, post them under the week 2 message board. And then also questions you'd like to talk about next week. And as I mentioned, a lot of the questions that came in this week actually fit next week better. And so I'm going to talk about them at that time. So thank you, those that were able to join this live stream. I appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we've given you something to work with. Have a great day.